Okay, we're back to talk about Widow's Bay, episode 5 on Apple TV. This episode titled What to Expect on Your Trip, written by Colton Dunn and directed by Andrew DeYoung. After Reverend Vice's death, Tom establishes a 7 p.m. curfew, angering everyone on the island who's trying to do things to cater to all of these tourists. While looking through Bryce's things in his office, Tom, Wick, and Patricia discover a few things they decide to follow up on. Some psychedelic mushrooms, a page of writing from what looks like an old book, and a phone number that Bryce called frequently. The number belongs to Todd, a shaman who helps people through their drug journeys. Todd prepares some of the mushrooms for Wick to take so they can help find some of the answers that Bryce were looking for, but it's accidentally given to Tom instead. This sends him into a hallucinogenic state for the rest of the day, including during his search for his son Evan, his time working in the office, and while he attends a town hall where people are complaining about the curfew. Wick learns from the page out of the book that some of the island's mysteries might be buried with the town's founder. Evan and his friends tell stories about the boogeyman to some off-island girls, and then Sheriff Betcher busts Evan right before he's about to break into the boogeyman's old house. When Tom and Evan are back together at home again, Tom gets sick and flashes back to when Evan was born, a day when Tom and his wife Lauren were leaving the island on a ferry. Lauren lost her eyesight. She started to become delirious and then presumably died sometime after giving birth to Evan. I don't know if you saw last week, but Widow's Bay has entered their actors and actresses, their episodes, their writers into comedy category for Emmy consideration. Probably not a surprise, but I found it interesting in this episode in particular that despite some very dark and some really deep material that they explore, there was still this sort of comedic element that I just couldn't get past. And I just found really great in this episode. This episode written by Colton Dunn, a former Key and Peele sketch writer and
Hmm.
performer on the Superstore show. So just again, just great mashup that they just are finding new ways to give us every week.
Yeah, I mean, I love the show overall. So this episode, um, I was really looking forward to talking to you about it, Ryan, because for me, it didn't work as well as the previous ones. Am I alone in that? Or, I mean, it
Hmm.
was it was okay. I thought it was okay. It was fine, but I didn't laugh as much, and I didn't find really anything particularly scary. It was just there was a lot of plot, which maybe
Yeah,
that's fine, but
there was absolutely a lot of exploration of plot and a lot of exploration of where we're going to go next. It's funny you say that. I actually thought some of the humor elements of this, particularly in Tom's reaction to the drug trip. Just sort of so there were a couple of gags like when Patricia and Tom are leashed together. I did find a lot of humor in this episode. There was sort of some meandering to where we need to go, but I actually did appreciate that in this one.
yeah, maybe let's start there. Let's start with the trip. You know what I mean? Because maybe that's part of it. And I have some thoughts about it. So much probably hangs on how well that works for you. And maybe
Yeah.
I got caught up in this a little bit insofar as I don't know. I mean, like, I want to be clear. I've never broken the law in any way, and I've definitely never done drugs. But I'm not sure that the mushroom trip felt realistic to me, I guess. But I mean, they do say that they're like only on this island, you know. So
Yeah.
there's some super special kind of mushrooms, but they make it sound like it's going to be just this absolutely wild ride. And it is interesting, I think, structurally how they handled it because it seems more like Tom keeps blacking out. He keeps losing time.
Yeah.
But in terms of I don't know, psychedelic element or whatever, I mean, there's the one scene where Dale's face it goes weird,
Yes.
and that's about it. Mostly, it's just a matter of Tom losing time, I guess. And yeah, there are some funny bits in there, like they're putting him on a leash and so on. But I found myself feeling like it was almost like they cut out what would have been the funniest
Hmm.
stuff
Yeah.
on purpose. So I kind of get it conceptually, and I kind of like that, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I actually, so I read Alan Sepinwall's review of this episode, and he said essentially what you're saying there, and that this was almost, he thought, in a way, innovative. That for the drug trip, they didn't show any part of the trip. They sort of showed the rare lucid moments and sort of him coming out of it. and being sort of experiencing where he's at and not understanding what's going on. And so there was a uniqueness to it. I think Matthew Rhys of it all, sort of how he was able to portray that. It would be interesting certainly to see him, in the midst of the trip, but coming out of it and sort of trying to understand and be lucid and do his job as mayor and do his job to uncover these mysteries while he knows he's about to hallucinate again. I enjoyed that performance from him, which sort of kept me really, I think, attached to this one in terms of how much I liked it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting take on it. I hadn't quite thought about it that way, but I think you're right. So we're seeing the moments of his relative sobriety or lucidity, as you put it, probably the right word,
Yeah.
And so we're left to imagine that the rest of the time he's just totally wigging out or acting really, really
Yeah.
weird. And I do enjoy the way in which the show there, and maybe even more generally, does create that kind of space for the imagination to play in. Like David Lynch would say something like gives you room to dream. It
Mm.
doesn't spoon feed you everything. And I do enjoy that. So I do think it was a good episode. I just found it, I don't know, to me, just in terms of my experience watching it, I wasn't quite as entertained as I've been in previous ones. And maybe that's not a big knock because I think part of it will be with the show like that, right? We talked about before, it seems like they're kind of going for almost a horror premise of the week kind of thing. So it's no
Yeah.
surprise if some of those land better than others for you on like kind of an individual basis.
Yeah, and you're right. We didn't really get that this week. I think there are some minor mysteries that are uncovered in this week. We get a little bit, maybe a little bit more about the boogeyman, but that's, again, 25 years ago. So we don't really get okay, what's the thing we're trying to solve or overcome or the obstacle we're trying to get past this week. It did seem like it, the one, if I could sort of flip the coin on the other side of its head and sort of look at it from another way, the one criticism I have would be like, what was the point of the trip, right? I guess it was maybe it would have been different if it was Wick, but with Tom, we didn't really get anything out of what they were hoping to get out of it. It just sort of was this expanded time to get to what we would have revealed about Evan and what Wick is able to go do while Tom is under the trip. So what was it in service of?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess they kind of left that on a cliffhanger in a way, right? You didn't mention this in your summary, but at the very end, it is like he's, I don't know, is this real? Like approached by some mysterious dark entity,
Yeah.
um, and then we're done, right? So, is there going to be more that we don't quite get in this episode that we learn later? We were noting before we recorded, looking at the title of next week's episode, which we haven't watched yet. It seems like there's a pretty good chance we're going to get a flashback episode, so we should be prepared
Hmm.
for that. Although we were also talking about to let everyone know if they aren't up to speed that there are going to be two episodes coming out next week for whatever reason. Maybe that's part of it, flashback episode, but then also get us back to the present timeline. So anyway, I don't know. Yeah, I guess but I did feel that way too, a bit. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
we weren't getting. I did think it was pretty funny when Todd the shaman, as he calls himself, uh,
Yeah.
they tell him that Bryce hanged himself, and he says something like, "Must not have liked the answers or whatever," and then Tom's going to do the same drug. So there's definitely a good amount of humor in this. Patricia, probably not the person you want as your what's the right word? I don't know, just companion, or like she's supposed to be
Yeah.
looking out for Tom while he's tripping on these mushrooms. I don't know if she quite has the demeanor that you would like for the person doing that, but anyhow, yeah, kind of a lot of plot. They're sort of filling some things in. We should also talk a bit about the boogeyman stuff.
Hmm.
I did really enjoy another moment that I did find quite funny. It was when the sheriff shows up and says, "Evan, get away from the creepy house." Um, now, but the one question that I have in sort of piecing things together is what we saw at the very end of episode one, where they put the boogeyman, right? Because Evan's
Mm,
friend, whatever his name is, I think is the one who says, in telling the story to these, tourist girls, that after the boogeyman killed the teenage girls, they tried to kill him and they couldn't, so they buried him in concrete. So I'm
right.
wondering, we saw that hatch or whatever at the end of the first episode. We haven't returned to that.
Yeah.
Should we tie those things together? Is it like the boogeyman's down there? And given that the show's established that all the supernatural stuff is real, is like the boogeyman down there and still quote unquote alive and trapped and like, okay, we're gonna get out at some point or something.
Yeah, I think it's very fair to consider that. I mean, especially considering we've now, I mean, literally and figuratively approached the house. We've opened the door. Evan is, got very close to going in. At some point, we've got to go in there and explore this. At some point, we've got to figure that out. But I think it's a very reasonable connection to make at this point.
Yeah. It is creepy old house.
Yeah.
Um, Evan's grown on me. I don't know about you.
Yeah.
What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on the character? I mean, definitely at first I just thought he was kind of I don't know, a brat or punk in a pejorative way, like punk, like an old person would say about a young kid, not like, punk rock. But he's grown on me a bit. I don't know.
Well, it's interesting. He was introduced exactly that way, and it doesn't seem like he has or his personality has changed much since then. But what we've gotten are these interesting little nuggets of his backstory and what he is concerned about, and his dad won't let him leave, and why his dad won't let him leave, and how he wants probably nothing more than just to sort of break free from there. People, saying in this episode, "What? You've never been off the island before?" These types of comments. So you get this sense of why he is acting this way. He's just a, 17-year-old who wants to, see see what else is out there. And so
Yeah.
yeah, there's some context to why he was introduced this way. And I mean, when I find in the argument that they have at their house, a lot of times I'm like, yeah, I think I would be on Evan's side in a lot of these ways.
Yeah, it's interesting. Now, one question I did have, we saw in the flashback, or I mean, I don't know if we should even take it as a flashback objectively or if we're within Tom's perspective as he's
Yeah.
tripping, but we saw he and his wife leaving the island while she's pregnant, and then whatever happened to her exactly. Maybe that moment in particular, it was kind of like, oh, did she really look like that? Because she looks creepy in the hospital bed.
Hmm.
Did she really look like that, or is that part of his trip? Regardless, I don't know if I quite teased this out, so I'll just ask you what you think. Given what we see here, are you under the impression that Evan was born on the island or was he born off the island? Because I'm tempted to say like they were leaving the island to go to the hospital for her to go into labor. I don't know. It was
We
maybe a little bit unclear.
we have been told, I believe, in past episodes that he was born on the island, that Tom was not. Evan was born on the island, and I think that they tried to make that as clear as they could when they're on the ferry. And I think Tom says 3 or 4 times, turn around, turn the boat around, so that they are heading off island. Whatever it is that does its thing to the people that can't leave there happens to Lauren. They turn back around, and Evan is then born there on the island, and that's where sort of this whole story comes from. However,
Okay.
I think we are left with sort of some maybe what's a bigger theme of this show that um, do we believe everything that we hear or even believe everything that we see? Because we've heard Tom tell the early that part of the bachelorette party that his wife died from complications in childbirth. Well, that's not exactly what we see here, assuming Evan has been
Yeah.
born. We see her sort of in this comatose state. So what exactly happened? I'm not sure we know 100% yet.
Right. So, I mean, first, thanks, because I think I just wasn't quite following that well enough. And then in retrospect, I was thinking like, oh, I was pretty sure he was born on the island, but it seems like they were leaving
Yeah.
the island. And I guess you're right. There is enough information in there that they turned around. Um, So that makes sense. And okay, so Tom thinks Evan can't leave the island, and maybe he's right. But which
Yeah.
is funny because at the beginning of the series, at least, he's very much like, "Oh, this is all this curse stuff is nonsense,"
Yeah.
Even though apparently his wife died from it. what else happened there? Has he been repressing that? Maybe that's part of it. You know what I mean? So
Hmm.
not necessarily when he says that his wife died in childbirth, that is the story he's also been telling himself. And the
Yeah.
weirdness that relates to supernatural is something that he's sort of repressed that is coming back to him now as he is tripping on these mushrooms. So that might be part of the significance, and maybe we'll get a little bit more there as well.
I couldn't help but think about Patricia last week. Has she told herself the story long enough that the boogeyman attacked her and she escaped that she believes it now, or did that actually happen? We seem to be getting a lot of these sort of, one point of view. We're told a story, but what actually happened, and does that matter in the long run? I don't know.
Good. Yeah, I know, Gary. This is a good moment for me to thread in the YouTube comment we got this past week and talk about it a little bit. It doesn't directly relate to this episode necessarily, but it was, last week we were talking about that question with Patricia and thinking about the boogeyman attacking, 25 years ago and saying thinking about
Yeah.
these women being in their 40s and so on. Anyway, the YouTube commenter was like, oh, no. Recall back in episode one, Patricia said she's 28. And remember that chef, who seemed like an old guy, his medical chart said he was 37. Time works differently on the island. It's weird, and aging works differently, or whatever. Now, I'm not convinced by that, but I do think it's an interesting question to note and bear in mind. I think when Patricia said that remark about being 28, I think she said something like it was her biological age. So I read it as one of those, oh, well, maybe I'm actually 40, but according to this, internet
Yeah.
chart thing, I have the body of a 28-year-old. I read it that way. And then I don't know, there are multiple ways you could read the thing with Chef, whether it's like the doctor, who we've seen is not the most confident guy, never updated his age, or maybe in another direction, it's that being out on the bay made him age faster or something.
Yeah.
But there's definitely something there, and it does seem like maybe something we should note and look out for further information that might relate to. Any
Yeah,
thoughts
it's
on
just
that?
it's interesting that this show sort of there's very little you can point to that is concrete, no doubt about it, set in stone truth that we things that we know that took place that we have seen in the perspective of we can take it as an honest viewer that this is actually what happened. Reliable narrators, all of that. There's very, very little of that in this lore and these mysteries and what happened and what these people experienced. Even in Tom's flashback, it's on drugs. How do we know? So very, very little. I just find that interesting and just putting in a little asterisk by it as we get, towards we now move to the second half of the season.
Right. Because I mean, also the technology's out of date and all of that, but we've already offered the interpretation that it just has to do with the island almost geographically or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I mean, of course, it's not a real place, so but somewhat plausible to me that some island in the Northeast would still only have landlines. And but if you start thinking about it, you go, oh well, you can't cell phones won't work. Why is that? Is it because it's cursed? You can relate everything to it, and the show keeps kind of confirming that that is
Yeah.
true. There is something going on at that supernatural type level. So we'll see how it all comes together here. Um, did you have thoughts about the actor who plays Todd? I know you noted his name here, Chris Fleming,
I just
actor.
yeah, looked up Chris Fleming. I had remember seeing him before. This is a comedian, I guess 6, 7 years ago was, was one of these comedians to watch. He's been in a few things here and there. I thought his turn this, sort of I don't want to say out of touch shaman, but someone that's fancies himself as someone that can guide people through their drug journeys, I thought was really well done. They seem to be um putting some really interesting people in guest, I guess you can call them guest roles. I unfortunately got spoiled as I was reading some things about this show of some people that are coming in later episodes that will be in interesting guest roles. But they just are finding, I think, very unique people to play some of these characters.
Cool, yeah, looking forward. I mean, I think the casting is great. I'm not really familiar with Chris Fleming, so I looked him up, and I noticed that he was in Corporate, which I think has been recommended to me, but I still haven't gotten around to watching
Yeah.
personally. But I noticed his character in that show is named Todd. So I'm wondering if there are now corporate fans who are like suggesting it's the same character or anything like that. But I haven't seen corporate, so it probably wouldn't fit anyway. But definitely funny because he is a drug dealer. That was one scene that I found quite funny when they
Yeah.
call him a drug dealer and he says he's a shaman, but then the follow up of is that cocaine? Because it's like, oh yeah, like it's one thing to claim you're a shaman who's offering people hallucinogenic mushrooms and ayahuasca and stuff like that, but like cocaine, you know what I mean?
Yes,
I
and
don't think anyone,
I have to
I don't think,
leave, and don't look in any mirrors when you're in this room.
yeah, yeah. And it seems like he doesn't ever look in the mirror. Oh, okay, again, face melting or but all that was in the gaps. It will be interesting. I'd be curious to hear even how they did that. Did they
Yeah,
write what he was doing? Did they maybe even film what he was doing and then cut it out? Will we get little snippets that
yeah.
come back to him later or something? I guess might be a possibility. It definitely is somewhat innovative, and I like that way of putting it that you were mentioning, which I guess comes from Alan Sepinwall. I haven't read his recap myself, but that idea that we're only getting his moments of lucidity, and quite thought about it that way, and I do like that, and I appreciate what they were up to there. Mysteries with the town's found town's founder, all the stuff Wick's getting into. We have to sort of piece some things together there too, because we're largely getting it from Tom's perspective. What do you feel like we know there?
So yeah, well, the little things we know, I sort of made a couple of notes here that there is some kind of cylinder that contains some sense of the town's secrets or its origins. It's buried with the town's founder. They've uncovered it in some of these old writing, which, by the way, this lady is like at the historical society is like should be working in the Smithsonian or something. I mean, she's like the best person I've ever seen, archivist or whatever that they have. But she's
Yeah,
uncovered some things, so I think that's where we're headed in the next episode to uncover some of this stuff. But all we know is that some of the answers might be buried wherever that is with the town's founder.
yeah. And who was the guy at the beginning who found the mushrooms in the snow? Is
I'm
that
I'm
going to
wondering.
matter?
I'm wondering if that's coming in a future episode. Yeah, I mean, clearly that's there for a reason, and it did not look like, the most modern of. I mean, it's hard to tell, but not modern dress or modern grooming. So we'll see that person who that person actually is.
Yeah, yeah. No, I definitely read this like back in the 1700s or
Yeah.
something like that myself. So, um, really curious to see where it goes. Yeah, we've got two episodes next week, so we'll cover both of them. Anything else you want to say on this one before we wrap up?
I think that about covers it.
Yeah,
Interesting, different perspectives. I think that's part of what makes the show so great. I think you can get a lot out of it, no matter what you're watching it for. Whether it's sort of some of these, there are mystery elements, there are horror elements, there are comedic elements. I mean, the performances. I mean, even Jeff Hiller in this episode, I thought was fantastic, and in his like 10 words that he said, and and the way he was
yeah.
shot during the trip. I mean, there's so much just to dig into here.
I'm a fan of Jeff Hiller, and it's interesting. Maybe when I, at some later date, rewatch this episode, I'll like it way better and be laughing way more or something. Like who knows? Maybe it was something about the
Yeah,
mood I was in when I watched it, or
yeah.
um, various things. It definitely was good, and I am enjoying the show. I was going to mention I did watch a brief little interview on YouTube. Might have been from Screen Rant with Katie Dippold and
Mm.
some of the cast members, Matthew Reese, Stephen Root, and Katie Flynn, Katie O'Flynn. What's
Katie
her
O'Flynn, I
pronunciation?
think. Yeah, I think that's right.
O'Flynn. Anyway, it was interesting. I didn't realize that. I guess this show, Katie Dippold originally wrote like a spec script to get hired on Parks and Rec. So the idea's been out there for a while
Oh,
like
wow.
that, and
Okay.
then now they're getting around to making it. Also, it's always like weird for me when I hear what Matthew Reese actually sounds like when he's not acting. He's just got this thick
Yeah.
accent. Man,
I,
you
I
got to give
I
credit.
do. I do have a theory, or I don't know if it's a theory, but maybe this is just a personal opinion that I think he has the best American accent for a British actor. I just think he does it very, very well. I mean, he's been doing it obviously across three different television shows in the past 15 years. I just think he does it very well.
Definitely got to give him credit for how well he does it. I mean, all
Yeah.
of these actors who, um, you know, do an American accent for the sake of acting, and then you hear them, whether they're British or Australian or whatever. There's a lot of actors that this would apply to. But I agree. I think Matthew Rhys, he definitely. That's the thing. Like, I actually forget that
Yeah,
he
that's right.
doesn't talk that way when he's not acting as an American. But that was an enjoyable little thing. I guess I didn't have much more to pull in from that. But oh, I mean that Katie Dippold is also behind the Babadook tweet. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, I think we talked, yeah, we may have talked about that before.
Did we
Yes,
talk
that's
about
right.
that on there? Okay.
Yeah.
Um, anyhow, just kind of filling time. I guess we're done. Thanks always. Thanks always for listening to the podcast. Hopefully you enjoyed it. So please do leave a good rating, review, all that good stuff. If you're on YouTube, hit the thumbs up. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Really appreciate it. Check out tvobsessive.com. You can find written work on all sorts of TV shows. If you want to follow us on social media, search for TV Obsessive. You should find us. And we'll be back with the podcast next week talking about Widow's Bay episode 6 and 7. So, again, no, 2 episodes next week.
That's right. 2 episodes, and we're looking forward to that. We will see you next time.